Thank you so much for that introduction, and of course to LCR for the invitation and the opportunity to be here today. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, I'm known to be able to speak without a microphone. I can get pretty loud. Um, Earlier, I saw a few hands that went up on who had served on the grand jury. I know Councilmember Gear had because it's on his bio online. And also there was a gentleman here. I would like to introduce two members of our local chapter here, Mr. Al Lucchese and Judith Wright. Welsh, I'm sorry, Judith Welsh, that was another member of ours. What I would like to do is tell you a little bit about my role and the California Grand Jurors Association and what we do and why we're here today. Basically, the California Grand Jurors Association provides educational material and training and continuing workshops for grand jurors all over the state. Why do we have grand juries? I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the selection process, the actual process of civil grand juries, and the complaints, investigations, report writing, and of course continuity. Before I begin, I would like to tell you about the four main concepts of civil grand juries: confidentiality, independence, collegiality, and continuity. Now that's a lot of information right there to talk to you in about, what, 20 minutes that we have? So basically I'll talk about the main concepts, and then for any of you who are interested in more detailed information, please meet me afterwards. I have my business cards and I can give you a little bit more detailed information or refer you to the proper links to get more information. So, how do you become a grand juror? Okay, well, let's see. Do you apply to be on the grand jury, or are you referred to end up being serving on the grand jury? For those of you who have served, thank you for your service. It is a commitment, isn't it? It's a year-long commitment. It's a fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th, or July 1st. And you really need to commit yourself. You need to actually pay attention, listen actively. The process begins with the presiding judge with the Stanislaus County Superior Court conducting interviews with the jury commissioner. 30 are selected, and these 30, their names are put literally in a box. And you show up in court, and your names are selected out of that box. So nobody really knows that day if they will be selected and will be sworn in to serve on the Stanislaus County Civil Grand Jury. So as your name is selected, 19 actually make it. And of course, plus the alternates. Now, the role of the presiding judge is very unique in this case. The judge actually, the presiding judge, actually gets to do the interviewing process, but they don't select the grand jurors. The only person that is selected by the presiding judge is the foreperson. Now, the grand jury being a collegial body, what does that mean? That means all equals. Even though the foreperson is selected by the presiding judge, he or she doesn't have any special powers or special votes. He or she is basically the facilitator. If there's a subpoena that's needed, if the media needs to contact the grand jury, the foreperson has that responsibility. Now, what happens after grand jurors are sworn in? There's an orientation that happens at the chambers. There's introductions by boards of members of supervisors, certain city officials, and then the training happens. How many of you really liked your training that you served? Okay, there you go. There's a response right there. The California Grand Jurors Association provides the training, and it's done by either regional trainings or a few counties from the state attend, or on-site training. Stanislaus County this year will be doing on-site trainings, and as a trainer, I'll have the opportunity to actually take part in training of some of our grand jurors. Now, what actually takes place in the grand jury has a lot to do with confidentiality. I'm sure all of you have heard with confidentiality. Why is it so important? Well, it's important because it protects the source of the information obtained and collected in the grand jury. It protects grand jurors. And most importantly, it protects the information obtained and collected that doesn't make it in the reports. What we call triangulation, which is the actual factual and validity of information collected. If a piece of information cannot be triangulated or validated for its factual base, it's not going to make it in the report. And the confidentiality actually protects that, what we call raw evidence, from making it in the report. So confidentiality is huge. And also, grand jurors are sworn to confidentiality, and if we violate that, it's a misdemeanor. So I personally have no intention of violating my oath because I don't want to be in trouble. And it's a matter of integrity as well. So for those of you who have served, that you know there are certain things you just can't talk about. Family members, members of the community, you can only discuss what's in the reports. Now, one of the most frequently questions that I'm asked when I do these kinds of talks is, what's the difference between a criminal grand jury and a civil grand jury? How many of you know that here? I know there are some here who have law degrees, but for those of you who know the difference, it's a huge difference, isn't it? You hear on CNN, you know, so-and-so was indicted by the grand jury. You know that's a criminal grand jury. And because the CGJA does not train criminal grand jurors, I'm going to briefly talk about it just to distinguish the difference between civil and criminal grand juries. Criminal grand juries are impaneled by the district attorney's office. The investigation and the case is all done by the district attorney's office, and it's introduced and it's presented to criminal grand jurors. And their main function is to have an indictment. So I'm sure you've read in the paper about indictments that happen. But the civil grand jury, it's a totally different scenario. All 58 counties are charged by law to impanel civil grand juries. All of them. So why are we talking about it now? Because it's in the springtime that the recruiting begins. So right now, there is applications, there's applicants, and one of the things that local chapters do is to raise awareness and recruit new members. So for those of you who haven't served, I hope I will raise some awareness today and get you excited and get you involved in this wonderful civic engagement. You want to learn about how your local government works? Serve on the grand jury. Basically what grand juries do is they look into operations of local government to raise efficiency and transparency. Basically, county government, city government, special districts, like health districts, for example, or JPAs. Who here knows what JPAs are? Of course, joint power agencies. What's the perfect example of a JPA? Or Animal Services Agency? They serve a multiple ratio of regions. And basically what the grand jury can look into is any services, any government entities, local officials, department heads that have to do with our county. So let's talk about complaints. One of the questions that I'm asked a lot is is every complaint submitted in investigation? Okay, anyone can submit a complaint. In fact, the complaint forms are online. If you check on the Stanislaus County Superior Court website, and I do recommend you do if you are interested. Not only cgja.org has a lot of information for those of you who want to read some reports, but our county's website is pretty sophisticated. I'm very impressed by it. You can actually click on grand jury, and you can read up to 10 years reports of the reports by our county's grand jury and the responses. So it's great reading. For those who want to know what goes on in our county, what the challenges are, I would definitely recommend reading some grand jury reports. Now, complaints.